Again, welcome everyone. Today, our FedNow program, we are joined with Philip Sprague. Philip joined the Federal Reserve in April of 2021. He leads a team responsible for the onboarding of industry participants to the FedNow Service. And he's developing and executing the FedNow industry readiness strategy. As part of these efforts, the team is focused on customer readiness and success with the FedNow, the integration of customer listening and process improvement opportunities, and pioneering a new digitized onboarding experience. Prior to joining the Federal Reserve, Philip spent 25 plus years in the private sector, where he most recently served as the senior vice president of a large financial institution responsible for leading the core and emerging payments products team. In this role, he was a business leader responsible for launching growth of real-time payments, Zelle, and the reimagination of the bill pay. And Philip, I'm going to hand it over to you now.
Thanks, Todd. Appreciate it. And thanks to all who are here and listening today. Hopefully we'll have a nice interactive session today. I'm going to try not to bore you with listening to me speak for an hour. So definitely appreciate any questions that folks have. Please pipe right in. I did want to get us started, maybe stepping back a couple of steps to where we really are from a payments perspective. So if you think about the evolution of payments and how that evolves to something you might be familiar with, right? So if you think about the evolution of something, again, in market that I think all of us have experienced, I always go back to simple examples of things like how people watch movies, right? So the evolution of payments is not a lot different from what has happened in that space. If you think about how that space has evolved, where did you first go to watch a movie, right? Well, the only place you really had an opportunity to do that was at a movie theater. So a physical location where you went and you watched a movie, you ate popcorn, you did all that fun thing. Then the next evolution was the introduction of a company called Blockbuster, which figured out that folks would actually want to go somewhere centrally, but watch those movies at their home. From Blockbuster came Redbox. Redbox allowed you to go to this nice little machine, very conveniently located in most grocery stores, and you could go get your videotapes or DVDs at that point to watch movies on. And now we are where we are today, where we've evolved to watching movies instantly through our TV screens or through our computers or on our phones. So it's sort of where you want it, when you want it, and through how you want it. The evolution of payments is not that much different from that. We started out in branch networks, right? And then evolved to ensuring that we had systems like ACH in place. The next evolution was the ATM came into play. So you're seeing this evolution from a physical location to more other physical locations, but in more locations from a convenience standpoint. And then digital, right? So as the Federal Reserve evolved, whether it's through online banking, ATMs, Check 21, and the evolution of that business, really going into the digital space. The next evolution of that space is really about speed. And it's really about understanding how we connect things in real time to customers, financial institutions across the board. So really kind of gives you an idea of where we've evolved from a financial institution perspective. FedNow was introduced based on the market's drive for a player in the space, a competitive player to what's out there in the private sector. It is different than some of the other experiences you might see out there, right? So the characteristics include 24/7, 365 availability, settlement in seconds, irrevocable payments, and immediate funds availability. This is a credit push system that has data-rich messages that really can connect use cases for customers. It is a domestic system that has controls in place from the launch, including things like network limits. Quickly, I wanted to just touch on where we are today. So the FedNow service has launched. We're excited to announce that on July the 20th, we launched the system with 35 live participants. Our focus since then and over the next probably 10 years will be, if not shorter, will be really around industry adoption and evolution of the usage of FedNow. Do we think the time frame I just described is one that will stay the same? No. We do see exponential adoption of FedNow and services like it throughout the market. So we're continuing to learn, continuing to evolve, and we're continuing to evolve both the interactions we have with customers in market and the product itself. We have a post-launch roadmap that is ever living and breathing, and we'll go forward with that as well. So with that, maybe I thought I would just take 1 minute to go through, for those who may not be as familiar, and I will share my screen here for a second, what and how FedNow works. So hopefully folks can see my screen. If you can't, just let me know. But FedNow, as I said, is a credit push system. And if you go through this lovely chart, you'll see 9 steps, 10 steps that happen. One of the things I'll cover here is, as we think about FedNow, it really is bringing together multiple participants in the financial services ecosystem to make payments go faster. And you'll see on this chart, financial institutions, service providers, settlement providers, correspondents, and end users, right? Recognition that these payments will go through those institutions to support the industry's growth. The other thing I will say, and the last thing on this chart, because I won't go through every detailed step, is typically, and the goal around this system is that all 10 of these steps happen in under 20 seconds. And so think about the realities of that payment movement and really how fast that will interact. So again, just wanted to take a quick moment here and really talk about what the system is, how it works. I'll stop sharing my screen because nobody wants to look at PowerPoint presentations. A lot of the questions we get oftentimes are around the benefits. So there are benefits that span individuals, businesses, financial institutions, and service providers. Some of the simple ones are obvious, right? Speed, flexibility, richness of data, but also a recognition of the connection between financial institutions and how important settlement is in real time. And we do provide that as an organization to the market out there in the FedNow space. Last thing I will say, and then I do want to open it up for some dialogue here, is we're in this business from a Federal Reserve standpoint because as we went out to the market and asked financial institutions about the evolution of real-time payments, they asked us to come into this space to solve real business problems. And we're starting to see those evolve, whether there are disbursements or payroll, delivery services, funding, supplies, or travel. The use cases are broad and wide, and we're seeing some of those start to come to fruition at this time. So with that, I'll stop and maybe see if there's questions from the group. Would definitely love for this to be more interactive and would love to get your thoughts or questions on FedNow at this point. So maybe with that, Todd, we can open it up to the group, or folks can put questions in the chat, or just let us know.
I don't have any so far. So anyone, if you'd like to submit a question for Phil, feel free to do so in the chat. No questions yet, Phil, if you want to continue.
All right, I will do.
Then I'll let you know.
Sounds great. Thank you. So a couple of quick things. One, as you think about the network, we talked about that being a two-sided network. We do have a receive side. I appreciate the question in the chat. I'll get back to that in just a second. We do have participants that are receive only. We do have participants that are sending payments, and we do have participants that are using our request for payment capability. So the question in the chat was, what are the potential abuses of the system? So one of the things I know based on, I'll take off my Federal Reserve hat for just a second, is whenever you're in a payment system, fraud is always a risk, right? So whether it is account takeover fraud, which tends to be the most prevalent fraud scenario in the financial services these days, or it's the scams that you're seeing out there, probably a lot more in the news. Those are real risks in the system today. And I think you'll see some of the controls that are in place, both at the financial institution and through FedNow directly, whether it's our fraud negative list or some of the focus limits we have across the industry. And I would say those are going to evolve as well. So certainly, I would say fraud is one of those that is a potential abuse of the system. There's lots of controls in place across the industry around fraud, but also the industry can do more. So we actually have a fraud working group right now that's focused on what does the next generation of that fraud experience look like, and how do we help to manage those for our financial institutions and for those customers. The next question, I'll just repeat this. Who do you see as the financial beneficiaries and losers of FedNow? So let me touch on the financial beneficiaries. So a couple of things. One, I'll go through the value chain, right? So the customer expectation, whether that is a business customer, a corporate customer, a retail or small business, real-time payments is at this point a must-have for every organization. And so as we go out into the market and as I talk to financial institutions, one of the things I hear is it's a critical path for financial institutions to get there. And the use cases there span a lot of things. So if you think about our gig economy workers who might have a critical need to get paid, if I'm an Uber driver and I want to get paid not at the end of the day anymore, or not at the end of the week or month anymore, but I want to get paid when my ride is done, right? So before I take my next ride, I want to get paid for the one I just did. That's a really big benefit of a real-time payment system, and that's safe and secure as we go. I'm not sure I really look at any of the opportunities as financial losers from a FedNow perspective. I think certainly speed of payments is a critical delineation that I think all institutions, companies, and people have to deal with, right? So I think, as you know, for small businesses, I hear all the time, cash flow is king, right? So how do you figure out how to find that path to ensure that services provided to cash flow, that window is shrunk? And I think that's something that's a value proposition as we go. So I appreciate that question, Karen and Edmund. You guys get the prize for asking the first two questions. I appreciate that a lot. Other questions that folks have? All right, love it. Keep them coming, please. So I talked a little bit about this, but I want to hit just on some high-level use cases. If you think about things like immediate payroll or account-to-account transactions, where there are already solutions in place, B2B and B2C payments, one of the questions we get in market is, why, right? So what is the value proposition of each of those? So if you think about a business customer transferring cash between accounts at separate institutions, sending bills or invoicing using our request for payment capabilities, paying those bills for suppliers, inventory, services, and rent, and then things like distributing payroll. I talk to financial institutions all day, every day, and one of the things that is critical is that they come back with is the recognition of the need to compete from a community bank perspective. If one financial institution has these capabilities and another doesn't, it becomes a significant competitive disadvantage in market. So I think that's where we're seeing the drive from a value proposition perspective. If you think about internal to a financial institution, reimbursements of employee expenses, payroll, incentive pay or corrections, distributions of things like 401k loan investments, funding customer or member loans. That's the reality of how this system can be used internally. And then maybe for some of you, a little more obvious ones on the retail customer side, paying loans or credit accounts, paying bills, right? The recognition of the need for immediate bill payment is a critical use case as we go forward. Emergency funds, right? Recognizing where those need to be dispersed, received, or sent is a really critical use case as well. Funding, cashing out digital wallets. So if you think about my PayPal account or my Venmo, how do I get the money out of those systems and actually into my account? And then obviously paying another person is another critical use case that we're seeing in market. Other questions that folks have? I'll hit one other section here because I think this is one that usually comes up, and I'll open it up again for questions. Oftentimes when we talk about FedNow and we talk about real-time payments in market, you also talk about fraud, right? Those two things come together in a single conversation oftentimes. It is what folks are worried about in the space as they go. So we have strategies and tactics in place as we've launched this service, and we have more to come that really help understand and manage fraud. I talked a little bit about the fraud scenarios and what will be there. I talked about the availability of 24/7 by 365, settlement in seconds, that these payments are irrevocable, right? The controls around network limits, making sure that the realities of how much money can be sent, it can be controlled. The data richness of the messages to understand where and how and what is being sent. And today this service is domestic transactions only. Daniel, thanks for in your question, what has been the biggest surprise, unexpected development since launch? So I would say a couple of things. It's a great question. One is the absolute awesome response from the market on the launch and the excitement across the market in moving forward with FedNow. We have a significant number of customers who are standing ready and waiting to move forward. They obviously have to work with, in a lot of cases, a service provider or a correspondent relationship to be able to execute on that. But we stand waiting as well to help them through that process. So just the excitement and the emphasis and moving forward has been probably the biggest surprise. We just put this out a couple of weeks ago. Since launch, we have increased our participation of live customers in FedNow by 5 times since our launch. And that is an awesome statistic and just really shows in 90 days the excitement that's out there in the market. So I would say that's the biggest surprise, unexpected development. There was a hope there, right? But hope is not often a strategy. So I think it's a great question. Thank you for that. All right, other questions? All right, I'll hit a couple of other things to cover on the fraud side. And then, Karen, I'll come back to your question in the chat. Thank you for that. At launch, we recognize that the management of the risks we've talked about is a very important thing. So at launch, we have 4 high-level capabilities that customers are using today to manage that broad risk. I talked about transaction limits. We have what's called a negative list, where on the sending side, if there's a recognition of a bad actor, that person can be added to a negative list and restricted from usage. Both on the send side and the receive side, that negative list exists. And then we have some significant fraud reporting that's available on day 1 of the system. So there's a lot of tools out there for folks to use to get started. I would say, Karen, to your question on the reason a financial institution would hesitate to postpone. So it's a couple of things, right? One, as I talk to financial institutions, small, medium, and large, a lot of the market today across financial institutions are institutions that are somehow supported by a service provider or a provider of some level of services to them. So a lot of the financial institutions may not manage all of their own technology, right? They may have a provider that they're using overall. So it's really getting in line to make sure they can be successful in doing that and moving forward as quickly as possible. I think there's still some education opportunities out there on the business value of moving forward. And then the third thing I would say is a little bit of fear of the unknown, right? So I think as folks think about moving forward with instant payments holistically, one of the questions I often get is, what's the strategy and approach that folks use? And what we talk a lot about is moving forward in a crawl, walk, and run scenario. So really getting started and getting your feet wet with something like receive only. And that's great. We love folks who are out there, starting to receive payments from those who are sending. And then maybe you move into send, where you've integrated more of these risk control, fraud related elements in. And then maybe you're moving forward in the run phase to something like request for payment. So I think really it's about getting started, understanding the benefits to your organization, and then planning out the impact and implications of that. And we have folks on board to help with that process. I am fortunate and humbled to lead a group of folks we call onboarding managers here, and those are dedicated resources to a financial institution to help them move forward in that process. It was also a great lead-in, Karen, so thank you. It's like you read ahead to a deck that you don't have, and I appreciate that as well. To what folks can do to get started. What can a financial institution do to prepare? One is we have a significant amount of information out there around the basics, general information and background on faster payments. What's the trending? What are different types of payment transactions? What's the anatomy of those instant payments? How do they work? How do they flow through? And then the second opportunity for folks is taking a deep dive into instant payments and learning about the intricacies, looking at use cases, figuring out for your organization, what might that mean? And what does it really mean to your organization and your customers? And then the third is really moving forward and embarking on that transformation. So considering the implications of 24/7/365, how do you get ready? How do you move forward? And then who do you need to partner with to make it happen? Great question. I'm not getting the full name, so I apologize that. But the question is, does FedNow replace money apps like Venmo or Zelle? If not, how does it work together? So I would say a couple of things. One, not every financial institution or customer has those applications embedded into their experience. I think there's a complement here, right? I would say that FedNow does not replace those applications. FedNow is a rail, right? So think about it as a background system that connects financial institutions to move money. FedNow is not a user interface. It's not a user experience, right? Like a Zelle or a Venmo, et cetera. What it does do is make those connections between financial institutions happen in real time. And so how it works together is, in some of those instances, I talked about wallet cash outs before. So if I've got a Venmo wallet, right, and today it takes 2 or 3 days to get my money out of that system and into my bank account, FedNow is an opportunity to make that faster, right? So I think these are complementary offerings in market, and certainly I think there's some opportunity for overlap as we go, but that's something you have in the financial services space. Choice is a good thing. So great question. Thank you for that as well. All right, other questions? I'll just say one last point that I have is, as there's lots of information out there on FedNow, and we have a community of practice that has over 2,200 members, 1,300 organizations, financial institutions, service providers, essentially everybody in the market is in one way or another connecting in to understand more and start their journey. We have what we call the FedNow Explorer, which offers organizations information and guidance on how they need to get started and prepare. We have some welcome videos out there. And then we have recognized that bringing in other players in the market, right? We're calling them ecosystem groups. So think about third-party service providers or fintech providers in the space, really bringing those together and providing an opportunity for a conversation and bridging the gaps throughout the industry for real-time payments. So we are super excited about where we are and more excited about the path ahead for FedNow. So with that, I think that's all the presentation elements. Would love to open it up if there's any more questions from the group. We'll look in the chat. We'll continue to look in the chat if folks have those or folks can chime in. So this is unrehearsed, but maybe Todd, I'll ask you, what are you hearing from your organization, and how is that? Maybe what are you hearing? Questions around FedNow, real-time payments, et cetera. Hopefully, we help to answer some of those today. But maybe I'll just ask you, what are you hearing out there, Todd?
Specifically, I have not heard anything directly. I think there's just a lot of buzz right now surrounding cryptocurrencies and all these new payment methods and everything that's going on. So I think that the level of questions are just more baseline and general knowledge at this point. I think the longer the program, takes to roll out, will probably be where we see the more questions coming in, right? I think after we get 3/4 of the year, gone by, or the first year anniversary of FedNow, I think the attention is going to be a lot more focused on it.
Oh, great. Thanks, Todd. And again, question in the chat, how will FedNow impact the banking industry, small versus larger financial institutions? It's a great question. And it really is the vision of why we are in this business, right? So our goal from a FedNow perspective is ubiquitous access to real-time payments across all financial institutions, large and small. So I think today there are options in the market that are being taken advantage of, but I think there's opportunity to reach into the smaller, mid-sized financial institutions and make sure they have access to the same tools, the same capabilities, and the same speed of payments to meet their customers' needs as well. So I think the goal is, rise all tides here, right? Make sure that throughout the industry, all financial institutions, and therefore all customers and all citizens and small businesses and organizations have access to this capability. So I think your question causes me to get sometimes pretty preachy, but it is the vision and the mission of why we're here. And so I definitely appreciate that question a lot. All right. Well, I will just maybe close by, and I'll give folks another minute here by saying thank you. Each organization that we have the opportunity to go speak with, I think, provides a unique perspective on our market, our industry, our customers. And so if you have other questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Find me on LinkedIn. You can find my contact information out there. Happy to chat with you all. Janet, appreciate your question. Are government entities, both federal and state, adopting FedNow to disperse payments? So it's a great question. Actually, a recent press release from the Treasury around their direction for the movement forward of FedNow. Treasury was a part of our pilot program, as well as an active member of those customers who launched on day one, right? So one of the things we have to see as we go forward is how do those agencies move forward, but we did see Treasury participation on day one. And we're super excited about that. I think there's a real opportunity there for the right use cases to really enhance everyone's experience with payments across the board with the Treasury's participation. So thanks for your question there. All right.
Is there any last questions for Phil before we break? All right. Well, Phil, thank you very much for taking this time with us. We greatly appreciate it. For everyone that is in the call, as I stated earlier, that this was recorded and it will be put in our resource library on our website. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Todd, and thanks for the invitation. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.